You are surrounded by fools, and it is exhausting. Every day you find yourself trapped in conversations that feel like a slow assault on your sanity. A meeting, a family gathering, a comment section. The location changes, but the pattern never does. Someone speaks with absolute certainty about something they clearly do not understand. You hear the flaws immediately, the contradictions, the missing pieces, the conclusions built on emotion instead of evidence. Your mind starts working before they even finish speaking. You gather the facts, you organize the logic, you prepare the perfect explanation. Because you believe something dangerous. You believe the truth matters. You believe that if people are shown enough evidence, they will change their minds. You believe that reason is stronger than ignorance. And that belief is precisely why you keep suffering. The modern world teaches you that disagreement is a misunderstanding waiting to be solved, that every conflict can be resolved through dialogue, that if you communicate clearly enough, anyone can be persuaded. Arthur Schopenhauer saw through this illusion long ago. He understood something most people spend their entire lives refusing to accept. Most arguments are not about truth. They are about power. They are about identity. They are about ego. The moment you understand this, an uncomfortable realization begins to emerge. The person arguing with you may have no interest whatsoever in discovering what is true. In fact, truth may be the last thing they want, because truth demands sacrifice. Truth demands humility. Truth demands the ability to admit that yesterday's beliefs were wrong. And for many people, that price is simply too high. Think about the last time you argued with someone who was obviously mistaken. You presented evidence. They rejected it. You clarified your position. They misunderstood it. You exposed contradictions in their reasoning. They doubled down. The more clearly you explained, the more resistant they became. Why? Because you were fighting the wrong battle. You thought you were debating ideas. They thought they were defending themselves. This is the intelligence trap. The intelligent person assumes everyone values truth the way they do. The intelligent person assumes that evidence changes minds. The intelligent person assumes that logic is universal. It is not. Psychologists call one part of this phenomenon the Dunning-Kruger effect, one of the most fascinating and frustrating distortions in human psychology. People with the least competence often possess the greatest confidence, not because they are secretly intelligent, but because the skills required to perform well are often the same skills required to recognize poor performance. The less they know, the less capable they become of recognizing how little they know, and so they walk through life armored by certainty. Meanwhile, the intelligent person sees complexity, nuance, probability, exceptions, uncertainty. The fool sees certainty, and certainty is seductive. It sounds powerful. It sounds convincing. It sounds like leadership, which is why crowds are often drawn toward confidence long before they are drawn toward competence. This is where the trap closes. You assume you are participating in a search for truth. They are participating in a struggle for validation. You are trying to exchange information. They are trying to protect identity. You are using logic as a tool for discovery. They are using belief as a shield against discomfort. And the moment logic threatens their ego, the debate stops being intellectual. It becomes emotional. It becomes tribal. It becomes personal. That is why you leave exhausted. Not because they defeated your argument, but because they were never arguing on the same battlefield. And what makes this realization truly dangerous is what comes next. Because once you understand that ignorance is not simply a lack of knowledge, but an active defense mechanism, you begin to see why logic alone has so little power against it. So what do you do? If logic fails, if evidence changes nothing, if every fact you present only makes the other person more certain they are right, how do you win? Most intelligent people respond the same way. They push harder. They gather more evidence, more examples, more statistics, more proof. They assume the problem is a lack of information. Surely, if they explain clearly enough, the other person will finally understand. But that assumption is the trap. Because the battle is not taking place in the intellect. It is taking place in the ego. Schopenhauer understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. People do not defend their beliefs because those beliefs are true. They defend them because those beliefs have become part of their identity. The moment a belief becomes tied to the self-logic becomes a threat. Every correction feels like an insult. Every contradiction feels like humiliation. Every fact feels like an attack. You think you are discussing ideas. They think they are defending themselves. And the human ego is ruthless when it feels cornered. It will reject evidence, ignore contradictions, rewrite reality, anything to avoid admitting it was wrong. This is why arguing with a fool is so exhausting. The harder you push, the harder they resist. The more logic you provide, the more emotional they become. You are feeding the very mechanism you are trying to defeat. So stop fighting the belief directly. Stop attacking the fortress. There is a more effective strategy. One Schopenhauer understood well. Do not disagree. Agree. But agree so completely that the argument collapses under its own weight. In philosophy, this is called reductio ad absurdum, taking an idea and pushing it to its logical conclusion. Not the conclusion its owner prefers, the conclusion it naturally creates. Imagine someone insists that all modern art is a scam. Most people would argue. They would talk about technique, history, creativity, expression. Instead, lean in, nod, and say, "You're absolutely right. In fact, if it's that easy, we should quit our jobs today. You can paint the masterpieces. I'll find the gallery. We'll be millionaires by Friday. Now watch carefully. You have not attacked them. You have not disagreed. You have completely accepted their premise, but you have accelerated it. You have forced their logic to arrive at its destination. And suddenly something changes. They begin to hesitate. They start adding qualifications, exceptions, nuance. Without realizing it, they begin arguing against their own position. The contradiction reveals itself, not because you exposed it, because they walked directly into it. That is the genius of the strategy. The fool expects resistance. Resistance validates them. Resistance gives them significance. Every argument proves their idea is worth fighting over. But complete agreement catches them off guard. You deny them the conflict they crave. You deny them the friction that keeps the argument alive. And most importantly, you protect your own energy. Because the goal was never to defeat them. The goal was to stop being dragged into a battle that cannot be won. Schopenhauer understood something most people never learn. Truth has very little value in a debate with a fool. The fool is not searching for understanding. They are searching for validation. And the moment you stop supplying it, their entire strategy begins to collapse. You step out of the ring. You stop wrestling with their ignorance. And for the first time, you realize that the greatest victory is not proving them wrong. It is refusing to let their irrationality consume your time, your attention, and your peace. Bottom of form. But this strategy requires something far more difficult than winning an argument. It requires killing a part of your ego. Because the real reason fools exhaust you is not their stupidity. It is your need to be recognized as right. Think about it. Why do you keep explaining? Why do you keep defending your position? Why do you keep returning to the same pointless debates? Because some part of you still hopes for a moment that never comes. The moment they finally admit you were right. The moment they acknowledge your reasoning. The moment they validate your intelligence. Schopenhauer considered this a trap. Why seek recognition from a mind incapable of recognizing what is true? Why ask a blind man to admire your painting? Why ask a fool to appreciate your wisdom? The intelligent person believes victory comes when the other side finally understands. The wise person understands that victory comes when they stop caring whether the other side understands at all. The moment you abandon the need for validation, something changes. Their provocations lose power. Their confidence becomes almost amusing. Their opinions stop feeling like threats. You no longer need to correct every mistake. You no longer need to challenge every foolish statement. You simply observe. And that observation creates distance. Schopenhauer called this distance essential. You cannot avoid foolish people completely. They are your co-workers, your neighbors, your clients, sometimes even your family. But you can create a psychological quarantine. When you are forced to deal with them, do not bring your full intellect into the conversation. Bring an avatar. The avatar is polite. The avatar smiles. The avatar agrees when agreement costs nothing. Interesting point. I see what you mean. That's one way to look at it. The avatar gives them nothing to fight, nothing to resist, nothing to drain. Meanwhile, your real mind remains protected behind a wall of detachment. They believe they are talking to you. Let them. They believe they are winning. Let them. The illusion of victory is often enough to keep a fool occupied, and your energy remains exactly where it belongs, with you. At this point, many people feel guilty. They hear this philosophy and think it sounds arrogant, cold, manipulative. But Schopenhauer would argue that this guilt is exactly what keeps intelligent people trapped. You have been treating persistent ignorance as something that must be fixed, something that deserves endless patience, endless explanations, endless chances. But irrationality is not harmless. It consumes attention. It drains energy. It occupies mental space that could be invested elsewhere. The more time you spend navigating the chaos of a foolish mind, the less clarity remains for your own. This is why distance becomes necessary. Not hatred, not isolation. Distance. Schopenhauer illustrated this through his famous porcupine dilemma. On a freezing winter night, porcupines move closer together for warmth, but their quills wound each other, so they pull apart. Then the cold drives them together again. Eventually, they discover the only sustainable solution. Not complete separation, not complete closeness, the right distance. Human relationships work the same way. You cannot avoid foolish people entirely. They are your co-workers, your clients, your neighbors, sometimes even your family, but you can control how much access they have to your mind. You can stop treating every opinion as a challenge, every disagreement as a battle, every foolish statement as a problem that needs solving. The goal is not to withdraw from society. The goal is to remain close enough to function, yet distant enough to remain unaffected. Close enough to cooperate, far enough to preserve your peace. Because the moment you stop absorbing every irrational thought around you, something changes. The friction decreases, the exhaustion fades, and you begin protecting your most valuable resource, not your intelligence, your attention. Everything we have discussed becomes far more complicated when the fool has power. When the irrational person is your manager, your employer, your superior, the person who controls your opportunities. At that point, logic is not merely ineffective, it can become dangerous. The most dangerous fool is not the loud fool. It is the insecure fool with authority. Because deep down, they sense the difference. They sense competence. They sense intelligence. They sense the presence of someone who could expose their weaknesses. But they do not experience this as a reason to improve. They experience it as a threat. And a threatened ego rarely responds with humility. It responds with hostility. Schopenhauer understood this dynamic well. He observed that displaying superior intelligence in the presence of mediocrity often creates resentment rather than admiration. The mediocre mind does not celebrate what surpasses it. It fears it. If you openly demonstrate your brilliance, you may think you are proving your value. In reality, you may be provoking the very person whose approval you depend on. That is why direct confrontation is usually a mistake. You cannot out-argue a king in his own castle. You must outplay him. History provides a powerful example. During the era of the Three Kingdoms, the brilliant strategist Sima Yi found himself serving under Cao Shuang, a powerful regent, known for his arrogance, impulsiveness, and insecurity. Sima Yi understood the situation perfectly. If he openly challenged Cao Shuang, he would be destroyed. Not because he lacked intelligence, but because power and intelligence are not the same thing. Cao Shuang possessed authority, and authority can crush reason whenever it feels threatened. So Sima Yi chose a different strategy. He concealed his strength. When spies were sent to observe him, he pretended to be weak, old, confused, harmless. He dropped food from his hands. He appeared forgetful. He acted like a man whose best years were behind him. The performance worked. Cao Shuang saw exactly what he wanted to see. Not a rival, not a threat, not a strategist, only a broken old man. His ego relaxed, his vigilance disappeared. And that was the moment Sima Yi gained his greatest advantage. Months later, when the opportunity finally arrived, he abandoned the disguise. He moved quickly, decisively, and seized control of the empire. The lesson is not that you should become deceptive. The lesson is that intelligence does not always announce itself. Sometimes the strongest position is the least visible one. When dealing with a powerful fool, resist the temptation to display everything you know. Do not make their insecurity your enemy. Feed their need for superiority. Let them feel important. Let them believe they are in control. Meanwhile, remain patient. Observe. Prepare. Because true intelligence is not the ability to win every argument. It is the ability to achieve your objective without creating unnecessary resistance. And when power is involved, patience often accomplishes what confrontation never can. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that intelligent people know well, the exhaustion of explaining the same thing over and over again. You simplify the idea. They still do not understand. You provide examples. They miss the point. You break the concept into smaller pieces. They repeat the exact same argument they made 20 minutes earlier. And eventually you begin to wonder if the failure is yours. Maybe you explained it poorly. Maybe you need a better analogy. Maybe you need more evidence. But the problem is not your explanation. The problem is your assumption. You assume the other person is trying to understand. Many times they are not. They reach their conclusion long before the conversation began. The conclusion came first. The reasoning came later. Their belief is rooted in emotion, identity, tribal loyalty, and any information that threatens it is automatically rejected. Trying to force nuance into such a mind is like trying to install a new operating system on a typewriter. The architecture simply cannot support it. This is why Schopenhauer advised a different approach. Not endless explanation, not endless debate, strategic irony. When a fool corners you with an absurd claim, resist the urge to dismantle it piece by piece. Instead, step outside the game. Treat the claim as something so extraordinary that it exceeds your ability to comprehend. Say, "What you're proposing is clearly beyond my limited understanding. I must defer to your superior judgment." The fool hears admiration. Everyone else hears the irony. Most importantly, you have escaped the conversation without spending another ounce of energy. The debate ends. The drain stops. Your attention remains intact. Because attention is the real issue. Not being right, not winning. Attention. Every hour spent arguing with a fool is an hour stolen from something that actually matters. Your work, your goals, your health, your future. Fools consume energy. They thrive on endless circular discussions that lead nowhere. The more you engage, the more they demand. The more you explain, the more they resist. It becomes a transaction where you exchange something valuable for something worthless. You trade gold for dirt. Schopenhauer understood this economic reality. The intelligent person treats attention as a scarce resource, something to be invested carefully, not scattered into every pointless conflict. So learn to walk away. Let them think they won. Let them keep their certainty. Let them celebrate their imaginary victory. Because the truly important question is not who won the argument. It is who kept their energy. The fool leaves with the satisfaction of being right. You leave with something far more valuable, your time, your focus, and the freedom to invest both where they can actually produce results. There is one final reason intelligent people keep arguing with fools, and it is not the need to be right. It is the desire to help. You tell yourself that if you can just explain it one more time, they will finally understand. If you can just show them the flaw in their reasoning, they will avoid making a terrible mistake. If you can just make them see the truth, their life will improve. At first, this sounds compassionate, noble even. But Schopenhauer would call it a dangerous illusion, because hidden inside that desire is a subtle form of arrogance. You assume that truth is all they are missing. You assume that once they see reality clearly, they will embrace it. But what if they cannot? What if the problem is not a lack of information? What if the problem is a lack of self-awareness? This is where the Dunning-Kruger effect reveals its darkest implication. The skills required to perform a task competently are often the very same skills required to recognize competence in the first place. The incompetent person is trapped. They lack the ability to see what they lack. Their confidence is built upon their blindness. And because they cannot accurately evaluate themselves, they rarely feel any need to change. You are trying to rescue someone who does not believe they are drowning. You are trying to open the eyes of someone convinced they can already see. That is why so many attempts at persuasion fail. Not because the truth is weak, but because the person hearing it has no framework for recognizing its value. Look around your own life. Think about the friend who repeatedly makes the same financial mistakes. The family member who creates endless drama yet insists everyone else is the problem. The coworker who ignores advice and then wonders why nothing improves. How many conversations have you had? How many explanations? How many sleepless nights spent worrying about people who refuse to change? And what was the result? Usually the same pattern. They remained exactly where they were, while you became exhausted trying to carry a burden that was never yours. Schopenhauer's conclusion was ruthless. Stop trying to upgrade everyone. Stop treating every flawed person as a project that needs fixing. Accept people as they are, not as you wish they were. This does not mean becoming cruel. It means becoming realistic. You do not argue with a machine when it malfunctions. You learn how it operates. You adjust your expectations. You avoid putting your hand into the gears. The same principle applies to foolish people. Once you accept their limitations, something surprising happens. The frustration begins to disappear. You stop trying to change what cannot be changed. You stop wasting energy on impossible missions. And instead of endlessly trying to improve every fool you encounter, you learn to manage them, navigate around them, and protect your own peace. What happens when you finally stop fighting them? What happens when you stop explaining yourself? Stop defending every opinion. Stop trying to win every pointless debate. Something unexpected happens. You are forced to confront yourself. Because many intelligent people build part of their identity around being the smartest person in the room. They measure themselves against foolishness. They rely on the friction of argument to feel superior, to feel certain, to feel validated. But the moment you drop the rope, the game changes. You realize how much energy was being spent on people who were never worth the investment. Schopenhauer warned that a person of high intellect who constantly surrounds himself with vulgarity eventually becomes infected by it. The mind adapts to its environment. If you spend your days arguing about trivial things, your thinking becomes trivial. If you spend your life responding to foolishness, your attention becomes chained to foolishness. Slowly, almost invisibly, your standards begin to fall. Your conversations become smaller. Your ambitions become smaller. Your world becomes smaller. This is why withdrawal is necessary. Not physical withdrawal, mental withdrawal, emotional withdrawal. You stop treating every challenge as an invitation to engage. You stop feeling obligated to respond. You stop believing that every misunderstanding must be corrected. Instead, you become comfortable with a difficult reality. You will be misunderstood. Fools will misinterpret your silence. They will call you arrogant, cold, detached. They will assume your refusal to argue means you have no answer. Let them. Their judgment is based on the limits of their own perception. Why should the judgment of a confused mind disturb a clear one? Imagine walking through an asylum. The patients point at you and call you insane. Do you stop and debate them? Do you pull out evidence to prove your sanity? Of course not. You keep walking. You understand that their view of reality is distorted. Schopenhauer believed much of the world operates on the same principle. When a fool insults you, it is not an insult. It is a misdiagnosis. When they reject your idea, it is not necessarily a failure. It may simply be beyond their ability to understand. This is not arrogance. It is clarity. The recognition that your energy is finite. And every minute spent battling someone committed to ignorance is a minute stolen from your own growth. Most public debates resolve nothing. Nobody changes their mind. The audience simply applauds the side they already supported. It is theater. The truly intelligent person eventually sees through the performance. They stop playing for applause. They stop fighting for validation. And they begin investing their attention where it produces something far more valuable than winning an argument. Results. For centuries, we have glorified the wrong skill. We admire the intellectual warrior, the person who destroys opponents with flawless logic, the person who wins every debate, the person who always has the better argument. But look closely. What do those victories actually produce? Very little. The opponent rarely changes their mind. The audience applauds the side they already agreed with. Nothing is resolved. Nothing is built. It is theater. And Schopenhauer understood that intelligent people often become trapped by this theater. They become obsessed with proving they are right, obsessed with correcting errors, obsessed with defeating bad arguments. Meanwhile, the truly effective people are focused on something entirely different. Results. This is the distinction the video builds toward. Intelligence is winning the argument, Power is achieving the objective. The intelligent person asks, how do I prove them wrong? The powerful person asks, how do I get what I want? Those are not the same question. An intelligent person sees irrationality and tries to eliminate it. A powerful person sees irrationality and learns to navigate it. They understand that people are rarely moved by logic alone. They are moved by ego, emotion, status, validation, the need to feel important. Most people do not want truth. They want reassurance. They want their identity protected. They want to feel in control. Once you understand this, your entire strategy changes. You stop fighting reality. You stop demanding that people become rational before you can work with them. Instead, you accept the world as it is, a world driven more by emotion than reason, more by perception than facts, more by ego than truth, and then you adapt. When people are hungry for validation, you give them enough to keep them cooperative. When they are blind to logic, you communicate through incentives and emotions. When their pride blocks the direct path, you take an indirect one. This is not about deception. It is about understanding human nature. The architect does not argue with gravity, he works with it. Likewise, the effective person does not waste time arguing with the emotional structure of human beings. They build around it. That is the transition from intelligence to power. Intelligence is knowing you are right. Power is not needing anyone else to know it. Intelligence wins the debate. Power wins the outcome. And while others remain trapped in endless arguments, the powerful quietly move forward achieving their objectives while everyone else is still fighting over who was correct. The ultimate lesson is not how to defeat every fool. It is how to stop needing to. You clicked on this because you were exhausted. Exhausted by the arguments, the misunderstandings, the endless attempt to inject reason into an unreasonable world. You believed the solution was a better explanation, a stronger argument, a sharper fact. Now you know the truth. The solution is surrender. Not surrendering to them, surrendering your need to change them. The moment you stop demanding understanding from people incapable of understanding, something changes. The frustration fades, the anger disappears, the weight lifts. You begin to see the patterns clearly, the fragile ego, the cognitive biases, the desperate need for certainty. What once felt chaotic becomes predictable. And what is predictable can be managed. You are no longer participating in their confusion. You are observing it. Their opinions lose their power. Their criticism loses its sting. Their approval becomes irrelevant. Your intelligence is no longer a tool for educating every fool you encounter. It becomes a tool for your own advancement. Keep it sharp, keep it protected, and use it not to win arguments, but to rise while others remain trapped in them.